Hi friends. Alright, I have been holding off on sharing this information because, first of all, whenever you do expose something like this, you get a tremendous amount of backlash because even within the truth community, people want to believe what they want to believe. And there are certain conspiracies or certain ideas that are circulating that are false. And they're being pushed by people within the truth community that people are not aware that these channels are in fact controlled opposition or shills or what have you. And one of those lies, deceptions perhaps might be a better, more digestible term, is the giant skeleton. I'm sure you are familiar with some of these images, especially this one here. And if you look closely at these images, you should be able to tell that they have been doctored, that they are not real. And on, quick glance, they look legitimate, but they're not real. So this is not a real image. It's been doctored. You can look at how these people interact with this item, with this supposed skeleton. You can see how this image doesn't actually fit with what is going on. And if you can't detect that, Snopes is not a site that I support. However, on occasion they do get it right. And in this case, they have got it right. What they have exposed here is, okay, the myth is that the giant human skeletons were examples and proof of the Nephilim, which is just nonsense to begin with, because the myth of the Nephilim is that the sons of God entered into the daughters of man, and they bore children by them, and they became the giants of today, the men of renown. Now, the problem with that is a human woman would not be able to physically give birth to a giant this size, ever. It would kill her. So it's not physically possible. So this saying is false, and the proof is that these photos have been doctored. These images were assembled from various individual hoaxes that presented them with varying backstories, sourcing them to recent archaeological discoveries in the Mediterranean, the Middle East, or India, and tying them to biblical accounts of giants. Like multiple other instances of giant skeleton and skull photographs, these images are all digital manipulations, often ones created for Photoshop contests hosted by various websites. And here is the website. Design crowd. Giant skeletons seem too real to be a hoax. There's a lot we don't know about our own human history, which is why the results of archaeological excavations around the world often gain so much attention, and to make things more confusing, digital photo editing software has allowed people to add their own creative touches to the evolutionary timeline. Look across the internet and you'll find countless examples of remarkable human remains allegedly uncovered on archaeological digs. But despite a multitude of these manipulated models, many seem to have materialized from the minds of our creative community here on Design Crowd, who were previously members of Worth1000.com. Scroll down to see some supposed giant skeletons to view more archaeological anomalies. So there's that image that we saw earlier. Quote-unquote discovered while pursuing the mythical missing link. Fake. Man in the wall. Fake. Unearthing the explainable. Fake. If you can't see that this is doctored, then look closer. Giant outlaw. Fake. Look at the size of this gun. Come on. Oh my. Big dig. Fake. Look at his hands. Can you not tell that this is fake? This is manipulated. This is not real. It's not the same image. This is overlaid on top of it. Time to rewrite the history books. This is fake. This doesn't fit within this. There's a big gap here. How did they get this gap? If this was buried in mud, it just doesn't fit. It doesn't work. The way that they're interacting with this doesn't work. This doesn't work. It doesn't fit. It looks different. Same here. This is a different image. This is superimposed on top of this. The perspective is off. It's all wrong. His hands aren't touching this bone. It's well done, but it's fake. This is fake too. These little men have been placed here. This has been placed here. This has been placed here. This is fake. They're not even this. Look at this. Is just obvious. Mermaid remains. I mean, this is obviously fake. Giant cyclops. That's been doctored. So there you have it. All those images you thought were giant skeletons are doctored, photoshopped images. So if you do a Google search on images for giant skeletons, this is what you get. National Geographic, find out how the giant skeleton hoax. This is an article about the hoax, which is ironic because National Geographic usually gives you hoaxes. Graveyard of giants found in China, Smithsonian mag. This is fake. Like, this could be just a regular skeleton, and because it was taken at this perspective, it can be made to look bigger than it is, which is what it looks like they've done here. And all they have to do is tell you that this is a giant. And these are all fake images. Snopes. So the people who are taking these images and presenting them as legitimate are deliberately misleading you. Even this here, Gaia.com. Gaia.com. Giant skeletons have been found buried in mounds. Around the turn of the 19th century, there were hundreds of reports from reputable sources of giant skeletons unearthed from ancient burial mounds across America. If you pay attention to what they say, they're not specific about anything. They say reliable resources, but they don't state who. They say they were found in various locations, but they don't say where. And this is how they get around it, by being vague. So, Gaia is not a truth source. Seeking truth, ancient origins. Ancient origins is not a reliable resource. Gaia, ancient origins. Smithsonian's attempt to suppress the discovery. So now they're trying to say that the Smithsonian is the one suppressing the information. And that's also a lie that has been pushed around in truth circles. They're using these fake images to push their narrative. Using ancient origins, unreliable source. Smithsonian says they're fake. National Geographic says they're fake. Snopes says they're fake. Even the source of the images to begin with says they're fake.
We will cover races that influenced humanity since Lemuria and Atlantis, and the Great War that took place in our galaxy.
The U.S. economy launders $500 billion to $1 trillion. $21 trillion is missing.
If you're able to predict it, then you have a precognitive ability.
I do think that there's a non-human intelligence.
It's on the American dollar bill. New World Order is based on the ancient Egyptian concepts of government, finance, law, and the way the ancient Egyptians understood the world at large. That's why you have a pyramid.
We went inside this craft. There was a soldier standing right here. And there, all of a sudden, I see like a flash and look over and he's not there no more. I didn't know his name or nothing.
Have you ever physically been to a planet other than Earth?
Yes.
From my perspective, Mr. Kramer does believe that he is telling the truth.
There's a lot more going on. Is this the whole story?
I discovered the secret of magic.
Our job, while we're here, is to wake up.
The truth will actually blow you away.
Gaia is lying to you. Ancient Origins is lying to you. All of the truther channels that's pushing these images as real, they're lying to you.
This video here, where he's passing off this statue as being real. This is actually real. Age of Disclosure's come out and said it's real. But this is a being. So if this is what mud fossil researchers come to, then I have to leave it behind. And then straight after that he's going on about this so-called dragon again he's calculating at 900 miles long. Well, this guy believes it lives on a spinning ball, so he needs to do the curvature calculation at 900 miles and work out what this dragon will be doing around the curve before he even comes out and says that. The other shill to do with this is obviously Age of Deception, like these here, because this channel is mainly to do with mountains of being giants, right? But you can look at all these images in detail. At first I thought they were all Photoshop, but they aren't. They're just stood at specific angles. Like this cheek here will be about 5 miles in front of this one here. This will be 10 miles in front of this ridge here, and you can make them look like faces, right? So basically, if you was over the top of this thing, it would be ranging about 50 miles, right? None of them are faces. Yeah, so this is actually slag glass, right? And you can form them into these shapes and they look like living tissue, right? Which is exactly what that crap looks like, what he's showing. Again, I think that's Fenton glass. Looks like flesh. Obviously this isn't an artery, is it? And a vein, where the arteries blow out and all this and that. Yeah? It's glass. This is slag glass, which is exactly the same that's in the videos that he put out to wise up. Again, you need to get familiar with this stuff, because I think you're going to start having it rammed down your neck. This is what I mean by slag, and it gets dumped down railways, and this is where it's been getting all these specimens. That's, look, Flat Earth Nation has already made videos, many of them, where he's picking this stuff up and he's told you where he's getting it from. This here is about 100 foot wide, right? You can see this cheek here is way beyond this ridge here, and that's what I'm getting at with this image that I'm going to get to shortly. So this obviously looks like a face because it's trees actually that's making it look like a face. You know, you can look at clouds, can't you? And clouds can look like faces, right? This is the image that's on his page. And this cheek here, you can see, is completely separate. And this ridge, and the reason why that shadow is there, is because it's about 50 miles behind it. This is in front of this ridge, which is in front of this ridge, right? And this is the nearest one, and there's probably about a 200-mile difference here, right?
So that is actually Wise Up, who is exposing Mud Fossil University and Age of Disclosure in a flat-out deception that is talking about fossilized titans. The next one I want to talk about is the elongated skull hoax. And what these are is artificial cranial deformation. Now, before you jump all over me and say, well, that's what they want us to think. Well, look at who is bringing it to you. It is this man here. along with a couple others, like Michael Tellinger. He likes to talk about these people. But Brian Forrester is a contributor to Ancient Origins, which likes to talk about aliens and stuff, science and space, evolution. So Ancient Origins is not a truth site. It's an alien site, just like all of those videos that you see, all the so-called documentaries on the History Channel. And Brian Forrester is one of these contributors, and you can read his biography if you want to. But he operates tours, hidden Inca tours, and writes books and all of this stuff. But he is a faker. First of all, how does a skull have hair on it? How can it have hair on it without flesh? It's just ridiculousness. So, anyway, this guy's a liar. He's a shill. And he's pushing the alien agenda. And he works with Graham Hancock, who's also a known shill and a liar. And this is posts by Brian Forrester on Graham Hancock's website. So he's pushing all the elongated skulls and all sorts of other false histories linked to aliens and stuff. Now, again, I don't support Snopes, but they also say they're not from aliens, but an ancient culture that practiced artificial cranial deformation. And so here, this is an example. Deformed human skulls associated with the Paracas culture in Peru, unnaturally elongated, giving a comparatively pointed shape. The result of artificial cranial deformation, a procedure well known by anthropologists in which the skull shape is modified. Now, he claims that this isn't down to cranial deformation because the mass of the brain is heavier than it would be if it was a normal size. So some of these here are some of these as the examples that they use. Now here's an example of a person who has artificially elongated his skull. Same with this person here and this person. And this is how they do it. They band a baby's head before it's fully formed because it's soft when it's young. Their skulls are softer and easier to change. The problem that arises from people like Brian Forrester, or I'm mispronouncing his name, Brian Forster, is that he's got an agenda of proving aliens exist. These likely are people who have deformed their skulls.
This is probably the most famous elongated skull in the world, and it is from Paracas, Peru, from a very specific cemetery called Chongos. Next. And in fact, all of the largest elongated conehead skulls in the world have been found in one specific cemetery near Paracas called Chongos. These, of course, have been labeled as being Nephilim or Anunnaki or God knows what else. But all that we really know is that this culture died out about 2,000 years ago, and the cranial deformation was only done by two members of the royal family.
I wanted to show you a clip of an interview that Brian Forster did on ancient origins.
So it's only the most recent, sophisticated, extremely expensive DNA analyzing equipment that can take all of those tiny segments and put them back together. So it's been very, very difficult to find someone who would pursue that. We actually have two different geneticists at work, but it happened to be this one who's had samples for more than 2 years who has given me this initial result, which completely shocked him.
And so the thing most people really want to know is what exactly was found in that initial result.
Yeah, and basically what I can say is that he speculates that there are segments of the DNA of the Paracas which do not match anything in GenBank, which is the genetic database located in the United States that contains all known genetic DNA information. So he said there are segments which don't seem to be any haplotype of human that we know of. Also not related to Neanderthal or any other human-like being that has been studied so far.
Quite incredible, really. But now you have emphasized that this is phase 1 or stage 1 of the testing. What then is the next stage after this one? Is it possible that this result is contaminated, or it's not accurate, and that further stages may reveal something different?
It is possible. However, this person who lives in the United States and has a doctorate, he does a lot of contract work with the U.S. government. So clearly, the government wouldn't choose someone who was flaky or a sensationalist. He's taken a lot of time. It's been more than 2 years for him to give us the initial result of one sample so far, but he does have samples from 3 different skulls from Paracas. And so what I'm hoping is that this, and the reason why I released it, this information, is to try to generate interest from the public so that we can do a fundraiser in order to be able to study the other 2 skulls as well as other samples from the 3 skulls themselves, so that we can replicate the tests as many times as possible to see whether or not this is an anomaly or whether it's something which is truly mind-blowing, I guess is the term.
Yeah, exactly. And is it possible, the fact that it doesn't match anything in the gene bank, could it be that this is just a one-of-a-kind mutation, a mutation that hasn't been seen before and is just unique to that particular race of people?
It could be, but again, the whole study is so new that, and the Paracas are very mysterious people. Nobody has really studied them for about 70 years. The people who study them now study their textiles, but the whole idea of the fact that their skulls seem to be of a different shape has been dismissed in general as simply being cranial deformation, but in fact nobody knows where the Paracas people came from. They lived on the coast of Peru, and through my studies I believe that there's a certain percentage of their ancestry that comes from another part of the world, because they also, amongst the royalty, seem to have had reddish brown hair, which is not a Native American characteristic, and they were reasonably tall. Some specimens we found were 5'10" to 6 feet to even taller in height, and that's quite atypical of a Native American person 2,000 plus years ago living on the coast of Peru.
He's kind of added on that they've got red hair and they're extraordinarily tall, and that was really just to divert attention from this course of conversation. She's trying to get him to pin down information about the DNA testing, but he's been evasive throughout the whole conversation. Every time she asks him a question, he doesn't want to quite answer it. Now, he did say that this test revealed some unusual findings, that they don't fit into any known haplogroup. Now, a haplogroup is a genetic population group of people who share a common ancestor on the patriline or the matriline, so either through mother or father. Haplogroups are assigned letters of the alphabet, and refinements consist of additional number and letter combinations. So this is according to 23andMe. Now, obviously, I guess 23andMe would have quite an extensive database at this point, because they've been collecting millions of samples over the years that they have been active. And so I wanted to find out, how far back in history does 23andMe get their data? Now, what this says, like, this is not from 23andMe. It's very difficult to find information on this. I don't think that they can go back very far. I remember somebody mentioning how far they actually do go. I just can't remember the numbers, so I would rather not speculate. But for example, if your mitochondrial DNA haplogroup is H3, that means your maternal line is very likely lived in Western Spain. Haplogroups go back very far, at least 10,000 years, as much as 75,000 years. But that doesn't really explain. I mean, haplogroups obviously will go back that far, but how do you prove it? Because you would have to have DNA from bones that old. And granted, they say that they do have bodies, like skeletons and remains from that far back in history, but not a lot. And I doubt very much they would have taken it onto themselves to do the testing and use that and put that into their database, unless it is of like personal importance to 23andMe, which it might be. But it's a big project and it's expensive, so that's why they're getting people to pay. I think it's $100 now for you to pay to get your DNA tested, and it was like $200 before. So they're, rolling in the money now, but it does cost them money to do this. Not that they need it, because they are part of the elite, and they are funded by the government to do this project in the first place. Now, how many generations does your DNA go back? You cannot inherit more than half of your ancestors' DNA. Well, okay, obviously, I don't know who this is. Support Ancestry.com article, expected ethnicity results. At 7 generations back, less than 1% of your DNA is likely to have come from any given ancestor. Not really sure what to make of that. But anyway, that's Ancestry.com. So it gets difficult the further back you go, but when you have a skull or, remains from someone who you know to be ancient, he is saying that this group of beings died out 2,000 years ago, and so he must be saying that those remains are 2,000 years old at least. And so it is difficult to compare to other ancient remains. However, he does have a collection of ancient remains from 2,000 years ago and can compare to modern remains. Now he's saying that it's difficult and it takes a lot longer. He said that the initial testing took 2 years and they require fundraising to do the testing for the next round. And 23andMe, it costs, $100 to spit in a tube and get your DNA tested, and you get results in 3 to 5 weeks. So if a company like this can get your DNA results in 3 to 5 weeks, why can't they just send it off to 23andMe? And his argument is that because they're so old that they have to do special testing. Okay, so that's fine. But he also didn't want to go through the government, and I don't know why, considering, if he's doing archaeological research, wouldn't he get funding from the government to do that? I guess he wouldn't. And so he's using this as a means to raise funds to do the second round of tests, and doesn't specify how much it costs to do these tests. But if 23andMe, it costs you $100, here's what I don't understand. He's got all of these skulls, a huge collection of skulls. Why wouldn't you test all of them? His argument would be that it costs money to test all of them, which is why they've only done testing on one of them, not 3 of them. So he needs funding to do tests on the other 2. Now, this was in 2014. So he has been doing this since 2012, trying to get the DNA results since 2012. And he's also been working with Lloyd Pye. And Lloyd Pye, in the late 1990s, Pye obtained a curiously shaped skull from a couple in El Paso that he believed was an alien-human hybrid. DNA tests show that the skull is from a human male, and the American clinical neurologist Stephen Novella has said that the skull belongs to a child who suffered from hydrocephalus. So what's hydrocephalus? Hydrocephalus is a condition in which accumulation of cerebral spinal fluid occurs within the brain, and it typically causes increased pressure inside the skull. What does it look like? Well, it looks like this. And this is an extreme case. Now, there's an example of this skull in one of Brian Forster's documentaries, claiming that this is an alien skull, even though it's been proven wrong. Now, so Lloyd Pye, he's dead now, but anyway, he claimed that a superior alien race called the Anunnaki from the planet Nibiru incrementally terraformed and populated Earth for their own reasons, later returning to Earth and through a process of genetic manipulation produced humans. These ideas supposedly come from translating and interpreting ancient Sumerian texts. Anunnaki and Nibiru are names from Sumerian religious myths. Pye argued that these alien beings are responsible for the megalithic structures around the world, the growth and advancement of Sumer, the domestication of plants and animals, and supposedly strange flaws in human DNA. Those who are well read in pseudoscience will realize that most of his ideas have been inspired by the claims of Erich von Däniken and Zecharia Sitchin. After Pye's death, the Star Child Project continues to claim that it has presented the scientific community with a genetic and physical profile so different from human that it could be a new species, and solicit PayPal donations for further research. So his organization is doing exactly the same thing that Brian Forster is doing, raising money to do further research on something that is not alien. We all have to be mindful of the source. Look where the information is coming from. Always second check what these people are telling you. Do not take their information verbatim. Don't take my information as I tell it to you. Look it up for yourself and double check, triple check, quadruple check. Make sure what these people are telling you is accurate outside of the video that they show it to you. People make mistakes, and then there are people who lie. Making a mistake is fine, but outright lying and deceiving people with fake images and telling you that they're real is deception. And that's what I'm exposing here. That's what I'm against. That is what we're all against. We're tired of the lies and the deceptions, and for this to be going on in our own truth community, you've got to be aware of it. You got to be aware that this is going on, and you have to pay attention to the channels that are pushing it, saying that it is legitimate. So pay attention to what they're saying and the reason that they're saying it. Why are they saying this is real? Well, because they're trying to push the Bible. They're trying to say that this is legitimate, therefore there were Nephilim and giants on the earth in those days. That is exactly what their story is. And then they're pushing Titans. And then they're pushing, I mean, think about it. If you're pushing Titans, like Wise Up said, if you're pushing Titans or giant dragons on a globe Earth, it just doesn't make sense. It's not possible. So, yeah, it's all exciting to think that there's some weird creatures here. And there are weird creatures here. But these pictures, these photos, these are lies. So once you get used to looking at fake doctored images, they show up easier. You'll be able to spot them easier. But make sure you go and check what these people are saying. Especially if they're talking about UFOs and aliens and all of that nonsense. Aliens are not real. So make sure you check. Do your homework. Do your own research. Do not fall for the deception a second time.